You don't sound like someone who should be answering phones here. That's what a client told Naomi Brooks before hanging up. Minutes later, HR called her in. And before she could defend herself, she was demoted, sent to the basement, far from the marble lobby she once represented. But what they didn't know. Naomi wasn't just another receptionist. She was the CEO's daughter. And the DNA results proving it were about to go viral. This is the story of what happens when corporate racism meets truth, when power hides secrets, and a young black woman refuses to stay silent. If you believe every voice deserves to be heard, hit subscribe, and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? You're being moved off the front desk effective immediately, said Carol from HR, not even looking up from her clipboard. Naomi Brooks froze. She had just finished checking in a client when the words hit her like cold water. Excuse me. Carol finally looked up, her tone flat. We've received feedback from a key client. He felt your tone was unprofessional and aggressive. Naomi blinked. Aggressive? I just confirmed his appointment. I even offered him water. Behind them, the pristine lobby of Grant and Mercer glowed under soft ceiling lights. Naomi stood in her perfectly fitted cream dress, heels still clicked from the last confident step she took moments before. But now the ground beneath her felt like quicksand. Is this about how I sound? She asked, voice steady but tighter now. Carol hesitated. Let's not make this into something it's not. You'll be reassigned to inventory coordination downstairs. Effective now. Downstairs, Naomi repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. To the supply room? Before Carol could respond, a voice sliced through the lobby like glass. Naomi. It was Richard Grant. The CEO himself. Crisp navy suit, commanding posture, silver-streaked hair slicked back with care. He walked toward them, face stern, eyes sharp. Step into my office, he said. It wasn't a request. Naomi followed in silence, her heels now sounding like echoes in a courtroom. Once inside the glass-walled office, Richard turned to her. What do you think you're doing? Sir. You're embarrassing the company. He said it slowly, deliberately, like spitting out a bitter truth. I built this brand to be luxury. Class. Professional. And I have clients telling me their first impression is, ghetto. Naomi's jaw clenched. Because I have a warm voice. Because I'm not robotic. Richard slammed his palm onto the glass table. Because you don't fit the tone. She looked him dead in the eye now. Or because I don't fit the image. For a split second, his stare faltered. But he recovered. You're done here. HR will formalize it. Naomi opened her mouth, but her words stalled. The room felt colder now. She turned, her reflection catching in the glass. For the first time in her life, she felt invisible while standing in plain sight. Outside, no one made eye contact. Even Jake, the PR intern who once flirted shamelessly, looked away. Naomi rode the elevator down in silence. When the doors opened, it wasn't the basement inventory that broke her spirit. It was the label slapped on the storage closet door, Supply and Misc. She stood there alone, holding the same professional posture, same poise, only now stripped of her title, her role, her voice. And that night, in the dark of her studio apartment, she stared at a small kit on her desk. A gift from her mother. Just for fun, she had said. 23andMe, DNA test. Naomi had never thought twice about her dad. Her mom had always been vague. But tonight, stripped of every identity she worked for, she opened the box. What started as a joke would soon shake the foundations of the company that had just erased her. And Richard Grant? He was about to find out what it meant to silence the wrong woman. Monday morning arrived with the same sterile lighting, same glass walls, and same practiced smiles. But for Naomi Brooks, nothing felt the same. She stood behind a gray metal desk in the basement level, 3 floors below the lobby she once ruled, with a cracked Dell monitor and a phone that rang more than it should. She answered with the same poise as always. "Grant and Mercer, this is Naomi, how may I assist?" Click. Another hang-up. That was the third one that morning. Upstairs, people were whispering. Jake from PR leaned into Amanda's cubicle, chuckling. "Did you hear the recording? That client actually recorded her call." Amanda smirked. "That voice? She sounded like she was hosting a hip-hop show, not working front desk for a luxury firm." Someone laughed. Someone else snorted. No one questioned the obvious undertone. Carol from HR passed by without a word. She knew. Everyone did. But the recording? That had gone further than they thought. At first, it was just passed among a few interns. But by noon, it had landed in an anonymous Reddit thread titled, "This What Corporate Professionalism Looks Like in 2025. The post had a link to the audio. Naomi's voice, clear, warm, and articulate, answering a standard client call. The client, audibly impatient, snapped. "You sound urban. Is this how you greet premium clients?" Naomi, calm as ever, responded. "I greet everyone with the same courtesy, sir." He muttered, "Typical," and hung up. The Reddit thread exploded. Hundreds of comments flooded in. "She sounds fine. This is racism dressed up in branding. So we're policing voices now? I want her to answer my call. Let me guess, the CEO is a white guy named Richard." By 3 p.m., someone had screen recorded the thread and posted it to TikTok. By 4 p.m., it had 500,000 views. By 6 p.m., a client Naomi had once helped, a black executive from a tech startup, retweeted the clip with the caption, "Grant and Mercer just lost my account." Downstairs, Naomi had no idea any of this was happening. She was too busy stacking toner cartridges. She only noticed something had shifted when Jake appeared near the supply closet. For once, he looked sheepish. "Hey," he said awkwardly, scratching the back of his neck. "You, trending." Naomi narrowed her eyes. "Excuse me." He held out his phone and hit play. Her voice echoed out. The Reddit post. The TikTok reactions. The thread going viral. Naomi blinked. "Someone posted this?" Jake nodded. "It's everywhere. Even LinkedIn. People are mad. Like, real mad." She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just exhaled, slow, steady, and whispered, "Good." Because what they had tried to hide, what they had tried to make small, was now lighting a fire no PR intern could contain. Upstairs, Richard Grant was pacing his office, phone pressed to his ear. "What do you mean it's viral?" He turned to Carol. "Did she record it?" Carol shook her head, pale. "No. It came from the client's end." Richard's jaw tensed. "Of course it did." Across the hall, Amanda watched the TikTok in silence, a sick twist in her stomach forming. In the break room, a junior assistant whispered, "Yo, she might sue. This is discrimination." No one laughed this time. And Naomi? She walked home that evening in the same cream dress. Head high. No makeup. No filter. No title. But her voice. The one they tried to silence. Now the whole world was listening. It had been 3 days since the audio went viral. Grant and Mercer's public relations team issued a vague statement about investigating internal procedures, but the damage was already done. Major clients had begun quietly pulling accounts. A law blog published an op-ed titled "The Subtle Racism of Corporate Voices." Naomi's name wasn't in it, but her voice echoed between every line. And still, no one apologized. Not Carol from HR. Not Amanda. Not Richard Grant. But Naomi wasn't waiting. That Sunday morning, she sat by her kitchen window with a chipped coffee mug and stared at the blinking notification on her phone. Your DNA results are in. She clicked. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, just from how surreal this moment felt. She had taken the test on a whim. Something her mother had always dodged when she asked about her father. I made peace with the past, her mom once said. Naomi hadn't. Now, as the 23andMe page loaded, she scrolled past the ancestry percentages, Caribbean, West African, European, until her eyes stopped on a section labeled DNA relatives, close family. And there it was. Parent match, 99.8%, Richard Grant. Occupation, CEO. Company, Grant and Mercer Holdings. Naomi dropped her phone. She stared at it like it had just insulted her to her face. Richard Grant. The man who told her she didn't fit the company's tone. The man who fired her. The man who told her she was too much. Was her father? Her breath caught in her throat. Then something new flickered behind her eyes, not sadness, not even shock, just clarity. It all made sense now. Her mother's evasive answers. The sudden scholarship to a college she hadn't applied to. The internship recommendation that came from nowhere. The eyes Richard sometimes gave her, like something was familiar, but he couldn't place it. She stood up. Her hands clenched at her sides. If he thought demoting her was enough to make her disappear, he didn't know the kind of woman she'd become. Monday morning. The elevator dinged. Naomi stepped into the marble lobby of Grant and Mercer in a soft beige blouse tucked into tailored black trousers. No receptionist badge. No supply cart. No fear. The moment she walked in, heads turned. Amanda, clutching a clipboard, froze mid-step. Jake almost dropped his coffee. Carol stared like she'd seen a ghost. Naomi didn't stop. She walked straight toward the receptionist's desk, her old post, stood beside the new hire, smiled politely, and then turned toward the elevators. Up. To the executive floor. Security made a move to stop her, but the woman at the desk said, I think she's okay. Naomi arrived at the glass doors of Richard Grant's office and knocked once. Come in, came the voice. She stepped inside. Richard sat at his desk, mid-conversation on the phone. The moment he saw her, his jaw tightened. I'll call you back, he said coldly, ending the call. What are you doing here? He asked. Naomi placed a single sheet of paper on his desk. Read it. He glanced down. The 23andMe report. His name. Parent match. Her name. Naomi Brooks. He looked up at her slowly, color draining from his face. You knew, she said, her voice even. You knew all these years. And you still let them humiliate me. Richard tried to speak, but nothing came. She leaned in. You didn't just fire an employee. You tried to erase your daughter. He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, something had shifted. Fear. Guilt. Panic. Naomi, She held up her hand. No. You don't get to shape this narrative. Not this time. She turned to leave. Just before she opened the door, she looked back over her shoulder. You told me I didn't belong here. She smiled. But I'm more, Grant, than you ever were. And with that, she walked out, leaving behind a man who once built an empire, now crumbling under the weight of his own denial. Richard Grant did not sleep that night. His daughter, his own daughter, had walked into his office and dropped a truth he had buried for over 2 decades. And now, that truth had a face, a voice, and a following. By the time he arrived at the office Tuesday morning, he was already late. But the building was eerily still. No interns making rounds. No quiet hallway laughter. Just silence. Until he turned the corner toward the boardroom. Then he saw it. Through the glass walls, nearly the entire executive team had gathered. Amanda. Carol. The CFO. Legal counsel. Even a few senior partners from the London office, live-streamed in on a screen. The chair at the head of the table was empty, until Naomi Brooks walked in and took it. Richard's heart stopped. She didn't flinch. Didn't even acknowledge him as she tapped the table. "Let's begin," she said calmly. Before he could speak, Susan Ramirez, the firm's top legal officer, stood. "Richard, we've convened this meeting based on new information brought forward regarding conflicts of interest, concealment of paternity, and the internal demotion of Naomi Brooks." He opened his mouth. "That's a personal matter." Susan interrupted. "It became professional when you failed to disclose that an employee under your leadership was your daughter, and that you personally allowed her to be demoted under discriminatory pretenses." Gasps echoed through the boardroom. Naomi sat still, arms crossed. Amanda squirmed in her chair. Carol looked like she wanted to vanish. "I didn't know for certain," Richard began, but his voice cracked. Naomi spoke up. "You knew." She slid a printed email across the table. It was from 19 years ago. From Naomi's mother. Subject: "This is your daughter." It was short. Just a picture. A hospital bill. And the closing line: "She looks just like you." Richard didn't deny it. "I was scared," he said quietly. "My reputation. The board. I sent support anonymously." Naomi nodded once. "You paid to keep me invisible." She looked around the room. "And when I showed up, you couldn't even recognize me. You just did what you always do, protect the brand." Richard's voice dropped. "You're right." He turned to the board. "There is no excuse. I failed." Naomi took a breath. "The story didn't start with the DNA test. It started the day I walked into this company and no one saw me. Not as an intern. Not as a receptionist. Not as a person." She turned to Amanda. "You poured coffee on me, twice." Amanda's face flushed crimson. "And Carol, you demoted me without ever reviewing the call logs or audio. You made a decision based on one word: ghetto." Carol opened her mouth. Naomi held up a hand. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to fix what you all tried to break." She stood slowly. "I don't want a settlement. I don't want hush money. I want change. Real, painful, structural change." Susan from legal spoke up. "The board supports this. You have the votes." Richard blinked. "Votes for what?" Naomi turned to him, her voice steel. "For me to assume your role as interim CEO." The room fell silent. Then the CFO nodded. The London partners gave a thumbs up. Even Carol, after a long pause, whispered, "It's the right call." Richard collapsed into his chair. Naomi walked over to him, placed a hand gently on the table beside him, not in comfort, but in finality. "You had your chance to protect what mattered. Now, I'll protect the people you overlooked." As she exited the boardroom, applause broke out, not out of protocol, but from genuine relief. Naomi Brooks had not just survived. She had arrived. Naomi stood at the front of the grand atrium of Grant and Mercer, looking out over the gathered staff. It was the first time in company history that the entire firm, executives, interns, assistants, janitors, had been called together under one roof. Behind her hung a simple white banner. "This company sees you now." Her curls framed her face like a crown, her tailored ivory suit catching the afternoon light that streamed through the glass ceiling. She didn't use a microphone. She didn't need one. I used to stand right there, she said, pointing toward the now empty receptionist desk. I remember the marble was cold. The air was colder. And I learned quickly that sometimes the quietest places can carry the loudest judgments. The crowd was silent. I was told I didn't fit the brand. That my voice was too warm. Too real. Too much. Her voice didn't shake. I was told I didn't belong. She let the word settle. But here's the truth, the brand never had a voice. It borrowed the voices of people like me, then silenced them the moment they became inconvenient. A murmur rippled through the staff. Some nodded. Some lowered their eyes. Naomi stepped forward. Today, that ends. She turned slightly and motioned to a tall, soft-spoken woman standing near the edge of the stage. Linda Evans, you brought me water when no one else would look me in the eye. You left notes when others left messes. You reminded me what quiet dignity looks like. Linda blinked back tears. Effective immediately, you are the new head of employee culture and ethics. Applause broke out, gentle at first, then stronger. Naomi continued. We're instituting a full equity audit of all departments. Anonymous reporting lines. Mandatory bias training not once, but quarterly. Reviews will now measure integrity, not just output. She looked directly at Amanda and Carol, who stood in the back, expressionless. There are those who think silence isn't complicity. That going along with the system makes them safe. But safety built on someone else's erasure is not safety, it's privilege. She paused. And privilege without accountability is oppression in a suit. Gasps. Someone near the front clapped. Then another. Then many. Naomi held up her hand. This isn't about punishment. It's about repair. About building something that doesn't just look good in glass and steel, but feels good in the hearts of those who walk through these doors every day. She turned to the crowd. You don't need a corner office to lead. You need courage. You need kindness. And you need to act even when it's uncomfortable. She let the silence breathe. From today on, if you feel unseen, unheard, disrespected, know this, your voice matters here. Because if this company could survive ignoring people like me, imagine what we can become when we finally listen. Thunderous applause erupted. People rose to their feet. Not for the speech, but for what it meant. Naomi didn't cry. She didn't bow. She simply nodded once and stepped down. Later that afternoon, she returned to her old post at the receptionist desk, not to reclaim it, but to leave behind a note. She slipped it into the top drawer. It read, "Don't let them tell you your voice is too much. It might be exactly what the world needs." Then she walked upstairs. To her office. Her real office. No more basements. No more back doors. No more hiding. Naomi Brooks had walked through the fire. And now, she was building something new, brick by brick, voice by voice. Not just a company. A legacy. Sometimes, the most powerful voice in the room isn't the loudest, it's the one that refuses to be silenced. Naomi's story reminds us that racism doesn't always scream. Sometimes, it whispers in policy, smiles in meetings, and hides behind the word professional. But truth has a way of rising, especially when it's carried by someone who refuses to disappear. Naomi didn't fight for revenge. She fought for visibility, dignity, and justice for every voice that's been dismissed. If this moved you, hit like, leave a comment with your city and time, and don't forget to subscribe. We tell the stories that others try to erase.